begin our September 22, year 2021, 1:30 meeting of for finance. We're told weekly, we'll call a meeting to order and open the floor for any public comment. Anyone?
No public comment.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is the minutes that we have at hand of the September 15th meeting.
Move to approve the minutes of September 15th.
I second that motion.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 4 brings us to our first topic of discussion for today. And this is in regards to the higher education grants that's been before us. So we've got some development to discuss. There was one pager distributed. Yes.
We did advertise for COVID-related relief type grants to the higher education institutions in Cumberland County. It was distributed to all 5. We received applications by the deadline from 3 of those institutions: Shippensburg University, Central Penn College, and Messiah. When we put out the original application, we included all of the possible areas under ARP that funding could be spent on. After the proposals were received and we reviewed the proposals and reviewed the details behind the rules on ARP, we really determined that it would be much better to have them focus on Area B. Instead of, and I'll explain what that is, but instead of them, most of them, all of them applied for basically revenue replacement funds, and we really discovered that revenue replacement funds can only be applied to the county itself, and we can't pass on the ability to others under that category. So under Area B, it really focuses on workforce development as a topic. And then it also focuses on job training assistance or to address negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency. And there's a little more detail to it, but I figured that there are costs, and there's also another category as well that are health related expenses, so testing, things like that. So we'll back out for clarification on the applications to the 3 that we received applications from, and also asked for some additional information on, in one case, more detail on their underserved population, and another case, more detail on their tax records, just to make sure we had complete applications with everything we were looking for. We received 3 responses last Thursday. Central Penn College ended up applying for $1.5 million for a series of job training improvements at the college, really focused on job training. Shippensburg University applied for $650,000 to help cover the cost of COVID-19 testing. They also identified another area, which was COVID-19 treatment, but they didn't have a cost in there for that. We've since received the cost, but it was after the deadline, so we really focused on what we received by the deadline, because we've been consistent the whole way through the process on that. Messiah College applied for $950,000 for proposed costs of COVID-19 vaccines, testing, and medical equipment. Again, things that are eligible under ARP, and costs that they've experienced that have been higher costs than what their normal circumstances are. So when we really analyzed the applications, we focused on 4 key criteria: underserved populations, which is one of the criteria under ARP, workforce development, COVID-19 mitigation efforts, and then other COVID pandemic funds received. And you can see the weightings that we applied for each one of those, really focusing on underserved population, getting 25% of the weight, workforce development, 35%, COVID-19 mitigation efforts, 15%, and then other COVID pandemic funds received about 25%. Then we also applied some other factors. Once we did the initial scoring, we applied a few other factors to it, which were really Cumberland County-based students and the student body. So Cumberland County students, or what percentage of student body is going to benefit from the funds provided by Cumberland County, and then overall size and access to public funds, which again ties back to this other COVID pandemic funds received. The Central Penn project received a score of 93 out of a possible 100. The Messiah project received a score of 52 out of 100. And the Shippensburg project received a score of 49 out of 100. So and I'll explain that briefly. Central Penn has the absolute highest level of underserved population in their school. Their application was focused on workforce development. They didn't have much in the way of COVID-19 mitigation efforts in their application, so they received a lower score there. They also received the least amount of COVID pandemic funds received. Now, they're a private institution, so they did receive a PPP loan, but that was part of that COVID funds received in the calculation. They also have the highest percentage of student body in Cumberland County. And then they're a smaller institution and don't have access to as much public funds because they're private. Messiah received a score of 52. They are the lowest out of the three in terms of underserved population. They did not have much in the way of workforce development in their application. Their application was largely focused on COVID-19 mitigation efforts. They also received a lower amount of pandemic funds, slightly higher than Central Penn, but way lower than Shippensburg University. So they got a little higher score there. And then Shippensburg University received a score of 49 out of 50. Their underserved populations, stronger than Messiah, but less than Central Penn. They did not really apply for much in the way of workforce development. They focused largely on COVID-19 mitigation efforts. They received the highest out of the three by far, orders of magnitude higher than the other two in terms of other COVID funds received. And another piece about Shippensburg University is they're the largest institution here. They also are part of the state system, so they're have much broader access to state funds than any of the other two. So that's largely how the scores were developed. The scores were applied to the funding requests. Although we didn't talk to you about this after we got the applications and went through the process. We're really focused on trying to set a cap of some kind in terms of funding level, and we started with a cap of about $2.5 million. That's what I'd recommend to you to consider. If you feel that it needs to be higher, then we can make it higher. If you feel it needs to be lower, then we can adjust the grants accordingly to make it lower.
So you mean a total cap of $2.5 million?
Yeah, for this purpose. Yes, across all three. Yep.
Okay.
And so given that, we used the scores to apply to their grant requests, and then we also took some of the other factors into consideration, which were Cumberland County students and overall size and access to funds. And we're recommending Central Penn College for $1.4 million, so $100,000 less than what they requested. Messiah for $600,000, and Shippensburg University for $500,000.
I have a follow-up question too. You mentioned Central Penn College has the highest percentage of student body in Cumberland County. Mm-hmm. Do you mean students who are native to Cumberland County?
Yes.
And that might be stretching it a bit, but who actually reside here?
Yes.
Grew up here. Okay, so
yeah, I can't really tell you if I just know they live in Cumberland County now. I can't say that they that their family, they grew up in their families here. I don't know.
Yeah,
the data.
I'm not sure how to describe it, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could easily determine if, like at Messiah, was that person a resident of Cumberland County, or did they come here from New York State?
Right.
Somewhere else. Okay, thanks.
So we had the recommended amounts at the bottom, what we're recommending at 1.4 million for Central Penn, again, 600,000 for Messiah, 500,000 for Shippensburg. I have the more detailed applications and responses here, if there's any questions on specifics. And we also developed, I think, a shorter version of the one pager that provides even a more brief summary of that as well. I don't know if you've got a copy of that, but yeah, okay.
And so workforce development was a key component of this project.
Yes, we had workforce development and COVID mitigation efforts, and we weighted workforce development a little higher.
Okay.
How we did.
You mentioned that Central Penn scored 93 out of 100. Shippensburg, I thought you said 49 out of 50.
49 out of 100, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That makes more sense. That's about a little over, I guess, 5% total.
Yeah, I looked at, personally, I just looked at the requests and said, the requests are way more than that, and I think the need is even higher than that. We did set a cap of 1.5 as the maximum grant to be awarded. So the possible maximum under that would be 4.5 million if you wanted to go as high as that. I just grabbed a number after looking at the applications and looking at the score results and said, I think 2.5 million seems like a good number. You could go higher.
I'm not debating the number.
There was no magic formula or method to it. It was just after looking at everything, I said 2.5 million seems like a reasonable amount of money, and it's not excessive. They're just knowing the other needs that exist for ARP funds in the county. That's part of the challenge. In my opinion. Okay.
Messiah College applied for $950,000. There's a much larger discrepancy between what they applied for and what they received than between the other two entities. How are we justifying that?
So initially, again, I applied those scores to the numbers, but then we made some adjustments based upon Cumberland County-based students and overall size and access. So the biggest difference was Cumberland County students and access to money. And then the other big difference with Messiah was underserved population.
Okay.
They had I think it was 10% or less underserved population there at Messiah.
Okay. Thank you.
Since that was a major criteria.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm just thanking.
That's not,
Okay.
I'm confident in looking down here.
If you have any other questions or anything comes up after you review it further, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Do we have any next steps on that? Or
We do. We'll actually be back next Wednesday, and we'll have, we'll be asking for approval. And we'll also have documents. So we'll have the award letter for approval so that we can move to that next step. So our goal would be by next Wednesday or Thursday, we're sending out the award letters.
Okay. And are the entities aware of that? I mean, they would be now. It's
No,
probably
well,
meeting.
right. We were.
I told them their intent was to be moved quickly,
Yes.
but I did not tell them about, a scheduled meeting or anything like that, because I wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen.
All right.
yet, so. If I could just really quickly give you maybe a quick preview on what I'm thinking next in terms of how we move forward with ARPs. We've had all these meetings within the county. I think there's probably more meetings to happen. So I don't think it's an ending process. But I'd like to develop next a one pager around big categories and what sort of program categories, if you will, that would break it down into categories and start to lay out blocks of funding that might be appropriate levels of funding for those categories to talk about. Because I think it'll help a lot. There's the human service needs are endless. Some of the other needs are also very large. I think it would be good to get input and thought on how, you maybe want to allocate or propose to allocate funds based upon those needs levels. And then we can narrow in on, specifics around projects within that to make recommendations on meeting the highest level of need. So if that makes sense, I think that's what I'd like to propose, put that together and then come back at a future meeting and we can talk about that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it's somewhat like what we did with CARES. We had a general asset allocation model, as it were, but based on the feedback we got from the actual applicants, we were able to modify those.
Yeah, I think probably what you'll see within that then is some things that'll become grant programs similar to the way this program works. So you'll see some things that, we may have a grant program for X that goes out, nonprofits are able to submit on it, and it's focused around certain goals. You may end up having a grant program if you end up doing something around recreation and parks and trails, which I think is an area that would make a lot of sense and we've heard a lot of needs around. And then we would be able to accept applications around that, et cetera, et cetera. And I talked with Kirk Stoner a little bit yesterday when I was out at the Allen Road facility.
I think it might be just for conceptual purposes.
Yeah.
If we did those categories like you described, but I imagine even within some of those categories, you're going to have big ticket requests and smaller ticket requests.
So I think what I was thinking is like under the mental health area, for example, there's probably 4 or 5 major areas within that probably need attention. And we could see those 4 or 5 major areas. It wouldn't necessarily get down to the specific program or specific grant yet, but I'd like to go lay that out because one of them in that mental health area is addressing issues at the prison, ongoing. And then there's a whole series of other ones, and I'd like to be able to sort of break out sub allocations in those areas where we have a bigger item because mental health one will be a big one.
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
That's my only point of reasoning. I want to make sure smaller applicants
Yes.
get
Yeah.
their shot.
Yeah. I think it will all break down. You end up with smaller amounts going out in smaller pieces all the way through. It's just kind of bigger picture stuff initially so we can get bigger allocations.
Yeah, we say put the big rocks in the jar first.
Yeah, and then you break them up.
Okay. Very informative. Thank you. Okay, that was our first topic, and then our second topic, I guess we're ready for. This will be West Graham, the tax administration, briefing us on a number of the metrics that we use for our tax service.
Every June 1st, State Tax Equalization Board, we call it Tax Equalization Board now, usually, sends out a common little ratio. And what it is the ratio between the value that we're placing on properties to the actual sales value of properties. And the common little ratio in Cumberland County is 88%. Something to look at is if you're working within between 85 and 100, you're doing well. So we're at 88%, and this is actually, this 88% pertains to the 220 values. They're 2 years behind in the valuation. So these are 2020 values for the 2022 year. And so that keeps going down as the market keeps changing. And the market changes every day. As soon as you complete a reassessment, it starts to change. And so the market changes. So Cumberland County is at 88%. I think there's only 7 counties that's within the 85% range in the entire state. So that's how quickly it goes up and down. We have a report, the next page, we have a report on, we separate our between classifications. Constitution doesn't allow the State Tax Equalization Board to separate, it's all one class. So one class gives us 88%. Now, these numbers on the second page is between January 1st, 2021 and September 15th, 2021, which gives us an overall state tax equalization rate of 85.53. That's the common level ratio between those 9 months. So as you can tell, it's going down. It also separates it out by class. As you can look, the industrials and commercials is what is keeping us, is getting us down that low. If you look at the residentials, we're at 89.44, and then mobile homes and lots are around 90, 86, 90. So, but unfortunately, it's Tax Equalization Board doesn't distinguish class, so that number will keep lowering as we go along. Now, and some people think that, well, that means that the assessment office isn't doing their job. The market dictates what this common level ratio is. It's not the assessors. So we have to look at that. We also need to look at the coefficient of dispersion and the price-related differential. That's on the third page. Our coefficient of dispersion, which indicates uniformity. Again, it's not uniformity that the assessors they're trying to accomplish uniformity, but they're able to maintain uniformity within the neighborhoods that we've distinguished throughout the county. And so our uniformity is 11.1%. As soon as you've completed a reassessment, the uniformity or the coefficient of dispersion is between 5 and 30%. So for us to, after 10 years, to have 11.1% uniformity, that's impressive. The next page is sort of just a formula as how you determine what the coefficient the coefficient of dispersion, how you calculate it. So you're looking at the median values out of these sales. It's a $30,000 assessment. It was assessed for 30. The sale price was 60. The ratio is 50%. So it's a difference in the variation of 0. If you can look at these sales, it tells you the difference, the absolute difference from the median is the difference of ratio between the median value. So 34%, it's a 16% deviation from that absolute difference. And you go on, and then you add all those together, and you get a 0.694 overall absolute difference between the median value. So the medians, so you take that number and divide it by the number of properties in the study, and it comes up to a number, and then you take that number, that's the actual absolute difference or deviation average, and you take that number and divide it by the median number, and you come up with a coefficient of dispersion of 19.8. So that's just, and ours is at 11.1. So our cells that we have is uniform throughout the county. We're able to maintain that. So that means that we are doing a good job of not looking at properties and saying, well, you know, this sold for $400,000, and if I go by the numbers, I only have $270,000. You know, do you edge up a little? The assessors are able to keep a good uniformity within the neighborhoods that they're working. We also go through price-related differentials with regressivity and progressivity. The State Tax Equalization Board and the IAAO, the International Assessors Association of Officers, you know, they hold, these are the numbers that they look at to determine whether, you know, you need a reassessment, you're going to get a reassessment after it's over. And those numbers are between 0.98 and 1.03. And what it means is, so if it's a regressive problem, it's because you're valuing the lower values too high and the higher values too low. If you can see in your sample on price-related differential, the three cells that you're looking at, 1, 2, and 3, are all above the actual sale price. And so the assessment is above it. And then if you look at the next three, cell number 4, the sale price was $50,000 and the assessment was $50,000, which we were right on the money. But then we get into the more valuable properties, and we're 66% and 64% of the sale price, which means that overall we're actually valuing higher properties too low and lower properties too high. Now, why is that? Because again, the neighborhood may have changed. There may have been some neighborhoods that's blighted or losing value, and you can't go in and change that neighborhood boundaries unless you reassess the entire county. So you have to live with those changes. So if you have this shows a 1.13 regressive value PRD, but and again, it's between 1 and 1.03. If you'll look at our coefficient, our PRD, it's 1.0285, which means we are valuing higher properties too low and lower properties too high. But that's just because there's so many higher properties that are really going up in value, and we're maintaining what it was in 2010. So the market's good. And that hopefully that will keep going up instead of down. And then you have a progressivity, which means that you're valuing the lower properties too low and the higher properties, I'm sorry, the lower properties too low and the higher properties too high, the lower properties too high. And this shows that, and that's the reason why you have assessments of 60, 75, cell number 4, 5, and 6, 60, 75, and 90. You value the higher properties too high, and you value the lower properties too low. Why is it? Again, it may be blight, it may be something happened, industrial building went beside of this neighborhood, a lot of noise, things like that. It took the values down. And so when you look at that, but usually when you're looking at 0.85, you want between 0.98 and 1.03, but usually it goes up, and that's where we're at. So when you look at that, you're not too alarmed about it, and you're sort of impressed with the uniformity of 11.1. But there are certain neighborhoods that you're going to see that go up, that PRD go up. Right now, we've had in 2021, the appeals for 2021, last year we had 84 appeals. This year we're going to have 79 appeals. So usually on average, I think we have around over 100 to 150 appeals per year. But the last two we haven't. I think COVID had something to do with that. And also with the rates, mortgage rates and things like that you have now, that the values of the properties are going up and up and up. So in many places, so I don't think that's why you're not having too many appeals. 12 of the 84, of the 79 appeals are hotels. Now that's where we're getting most of our appeals commercially. It's through the hotels, which they did lose money the last couple of years. But we're looking at that again. And so if you have any questions so far about where we're at with the common level ratio and the coefficient of dispersion and the price related differential.
So just have one, because, and I'm sure I missed something here, but so the first supporting sheet that shows the breakout between the different classes.
Oh, yeah.
So that one totals, the overall number we're getting is 8553, but our common level ratio is 88. So what's accounting for that difference? What's missing?
Oh, okay. Well, this is between 1/1/2021 and 9/15/21. So that's this year's stats. The 88% is actually 2020, because we're 2 years behind 2020 value.
So the 2020 those are complete numbers for 2020. So that includes some of the upheaval we've seen in the market during COVID, I presume.
Well, this is actually 2 years old, so it's 2020, right? And so for 2022, so yeah, you're seeing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to go down somewhat in 2021.
What's going down?
The common level ratio.
Okay, all right. So the next full set of numbers will be closer to this 8553.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because 85 is our key number, essentially, where the appeals then get especially is that just to the commercial appellates?
No, that's for all the properties, but actually, a judgment from, I think, the Commonwealth judge, we have been doing it for the last couple of years, and every county has except for Allegheny County, have been using whatever the common level ratio is and lowering those values, using actually the common level ratio, even when it's over the 85%.
So that adjustment takes place automatically?
It does.
On an annual basis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because you had mentioned before, it can go up and it can go down.
Right.
So, and then,
With the sales being what they are, if they stay the same, it'll keep going down.
okay,
And if, and if you notice, I think there's only 7 counties that in the state that are within that 85%, or 85%. So that,
do we have a rank ordering of this?
I'm
Or at
sorry,
least of those top that are above 80, do we have a rank ordering here? I mean, I can figure it out if I went through all of it.
I do. I mean, Adams County is 96.3. The ones that are above 85, Blair's 93.
Adams was one of the ones that did they had the court ordered reassessment. Do we know what year that was?
I think they did it before they did ours. I think it was like 2008, 2000, in that area, 2010, somewhere around.
Okay, all right.
I don't know, 2009. Yeah, it may have been 2011, 12. So 2009, they actually awarded EST. So it may have been 2012 that they did theirs, because it may take 2 or 3 years to do it, because they awarded it in 2009 to do a reassessment.
Okay, all right.
Blair County's probably 2012, 2014, somewhere around in there. And you have Cumberland. Indiana is probably 2011, 12.
Could you, what would be helpful to me would be to have the listing of those who are above the 85 threshold and the rank order and the year they did their
Reassessment?
reassessment.
I can give you all that.
Yeah, just at your leisure, not person.
Okay.
Wes, I have a question. It's actually related to the housing market. I'm looking at the price-related differential with the regressivity. And I'm just wondering if the fact that we've had several times since last summer, a really hot market where the prices that houses were going for, they were very much above the appraised value, not just the assessed value, but truly the appraised value, because people were willing to pay 10, 15% more just to get that house because supply is so low.
Correct.
Does that give us sort of an artificial sense that maybe our numbers are skewing a little bit higher, but yet as the housing market smooths itself back out, hopefully as people start to sell and, the same number of people who want to buy a house, people are selling houses, that we might see some of our numbers falling into a better range.
You mean when they come to their senses and say, maybe I paid too much?
I do not want to cast any dispersions on anyone who is paying whatever price they feel they need to pay for the house that they want.
But yes, I think it will.
Yeah.
Once the interest rates start going up, and, people's, not thinking about buying such a large house or buying houses, then I think that will help us, I think.
That very much goes to the point I started to allude to earlier, which is, we always had this kind of discussion around here as if the deterioration of the Condo Ratio was one directional thing and it was inevitable. And of course, a lot of bad decisions were made based on those assumptions. We made some changes a number of years ago, and we get in pretty good shape. This number is trending very close to the threshold that we typically used, but that point goes to the disruption in the marketplace too, that seems to imply that this is not a one-directional trend necessarily. It's going to take time for us to understand that. So no one should look at that number on a one-time snapshot basis and say, oh, we have to do reassessment because we're hitting that threshold. So
That's correct.
okay.
And because we have to use the condo ratio in all appeals now, that number doesn't bear so much weight as it used to either. But that's where we're at with the, I just want to go over some of the tools that we use and some of the numbers that we use to determine how well we're doing with the county. And I feel we're doing well.
So is it safe to say, based on that same document that has the breakout, is it safe to say that the commercial properties, specifically industrials, well, I see you have them separated too. They're driving our average down.
It's surprising that, yes, they are. I mean, the values of commercial industrial properties along with the land, it's very high in the county. And well, it should be with the growth that you have and people coming in. And so the values are going up to remarkable values, I consider, especially some of the land. The land on some of these commercial properties that already had, they're just buying larger tracts or, adding on to their tracts on neighboring properties that it's showing that it's a vacant property, but it may just be an add-on, but it's quite it's quite a bit higher than what we valued commercial industrial properties in 2010.
This is really interesting because it does show that there's a significant disparity once you flesh out once you get under the uniformity clause, start seeing there's a significant differential. So,
right.
Is there at the time that we had significant debate about this a number of years back, the legislature was starting to seriously talk about starting to address some of these reforms and possibly even looking at the uniformity clause and saying, hey, this really skews the numbers. I've heard nothing out of the Budget and Finance Committee. They put out a thick report talking about how they were codifying all of the existing legislation in anticipation of doing a major reform package. There's a bunch of years have gone by and we've heard nothing about the follow-on steps on that. Are there any rumblings you're hearing out of the state association or anything about reform in this area?
No.
Nothing.
No, it has fizzled out. See, I mean, they're putting standards in as to, standards to properly do data collection. They're putting standards in for, not the numbers so much, but they're putting standards in for just small, one thing that it may help, our county doesn't have a problem, which is surprising that our permits, most counties in this state doesn't get all of the permits of new construction. And so a lot of counties have to canvass, their entire area every time they go out to see if something was built, and they didn't get a permit for. And so they're trying to make it mandated that you do get a permit or be fined. And so hopefully that will happen.
It's a significantly rural state, though, so that's got to be difficult to enforce something like that in a lot of counties.
It is. And, I've worked in counties where you had to canvass 3 or 4 times a year the entire county just to pick up everything that you needed to put on the tax roll. And but this county doesn't have that problem whatsoever. And I've seen larger counties have problems with permits, and this county is very effective in how the townships and boroughs work with the county to supply with those permits.
I'm still noticing, looking at the statewide numbers, there's still a pretty big disparity between counties. And I thought they were trying to, including what I alluded to earlier, the court ordering of various assessments, I thought they were trying to get everybody closer to, so we didn't have these counties that were in the single digits or low double digits in terms of condo ratio versus all these other counties that are, doing much better.
Well, if we had cyclical reassessments, it would solve the problem.
Well, if that was mandated statewide.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we had selected counties, this one included at one time, But that did nothing to address the disparity between counties.
Right.
Yeah.
And so.
I'm surprised the disparity still exists, because I know that the courts were starting to order, like Adams, it was one of those that was, they were ordered to do their assessment. A bunch of them were. I thought that was going to be more widespread.
Right. And it's, Allegheny County, Washington County, quite a few of them were ordered in the last 10 years to do reassessments. It's.
But that's on a county by county basis.
It is. It is. If they would just mandated that, put it into law that it should be done cyclically, it would solve a lot of the county's problems, and state problems. And so that.
I think one of the objections we had here was just the fact that there was such disparity that until there's a state standard in place, it's kind of difficult to argue that cyclical is more fair, quote unquote,
Right.
across the county line.
Yeah.
It'd be a totally different scheme, totally different valuation standard in some cases.
Right. Yeah, very much so. But it is, it's good to do reassessments. It's expensive.
Yeah.
But once, if you had uniformity within the county, then, you shouldn't really need to worry so much about if it's uniform, even though values are going much higher or lower, whatever. If it's uniform within the county, then it's.
The policy that was adopted here a number of years ago in replacement of cyclical was instead of having it governed by the calendar, it would be governed by a set of triggers.
That's right.
Condo ratio is the main trigger we settled on. Understanding it's probably not singularly definitive, tell about fairness, but
right.
Is there a better system than barring a statewide, which is not in the cards apparently? Is there a better set of measures for us to use in terms of measuring fairness?
The IAAO, the Assessors Association organization, the International Association, they look at the level of assessment to actual value, similar to the common level ratio, and they also look at the coefficient of dispersion and the price-related differential, and then they have another price-related basics that they feel is a better analysis of instead of the price-related differential and it's called price-related basics that they have developed to pinpoint a better understanding if you did a good reassessment or if there's a reassessment needed within the county. So those are the standards that we have.
Wes, on this page here,
Yes, sir.
I should know this, but I don't. What is the difference between what a valid sale is by, do we have invalid sales? What is the significance of it?
A lot of these sales are dollar sales, just deed transfers.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
so that's what quite a bit of them were in this analysis.
So it definitely would be invalid for this calculation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Can you answer, this is probably a dumb question, but how do we have a method for defining the arm's length sale versus those that are not?
Well,
Since they skew.
we fairly thorough with that too. We look at, we're on the multi-list,
Okay.
and so, the multi-list will tell us if there's any personal property included in the sale. So we're developed arm's length. We also talk to the salesperson and to the brokerage company if we can't find it on the multi-list to see if it was an actual arm's length sale and get that verification.
So
He was rather good at it, huh?
I was going to say, so we have a pretty good handle on that issue. That's not.
Yes.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
So I also wanted to talk to you about so I think right now, we're looking at, I would think that we keep looking every year at the ratio, the studies to determine whether we should have a reassessment or when a reassessment. I think that we hopefully will be able to maintain at least for the next 5 years to maybe then initiate a reassessment. The reassessment will usually take about 3 years. I wouldn't consider a reassessment now the way the sales have gone up, because it's going to level out, and we don't want to use these inflated sales in looking at a reassessment. So, I'd let it, the values steady, and then, within the next 5 years, take another look and say, is this the time to do that? One other thing we're looking at is a canvas system. The canvas system that we have, it's company EST, Evaluator Services and Technology. They started the company under another name in 1976. And they still have the same 21st century.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. And
Did they run into some significant legal issues?
they did. The 21st century, I think, sort of went bankrupt, and then
Okay.
Evaluator Services picked up the pieces.
But it's not just the same company rebranded or anything like that.
No, well, some of the same people, some of the different people, but
It
it's
was family-owned enterprise previously.
correct. The Bar, Dr. Barr,
That's Bar.
yeah, and
They wanted to do, they're just involved, or they?
his son Tim is still involved, and then Porterfields are involved, and Gardners are the owners, and so the system, the canvas system works on FilePro, and it's a mathematical engine, a strong mathematical engine, and Evaluator Services actually values differently than most canvas systems do. And so you look at it and you think, well, it's somewhat antiquated, and because I worked for EST, and when I would go to a county, I would say, I would talk to them about it, and they still thought it was a DOS system. It's actually Windows 10, but it's not pretty. But there's a problem getting the information out of the system into other departments, such as GIS and planning, and other departments that would like to have that information. So it's difficult. I can, use a mouse with the system. You still have to put direction arrows and things like that. So and I'm
I'm sure some of our
always-
people in this room even know what DOS is, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, some people ask if it's a DOS system. It frustrates IMTO, but but it the values are really good, the way it does it. And I won't get into it. It values on a gross rent multiplier, the commercial industrial buildings, and a gross income multiplier, where most systems use a direct capitalization rate, which is a whole different thing. So we work on this, and as the system work well? Well, you can see that we're at 88%, we're able to maintain uniformity. And if you'll look at the first page again, I did notice that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the counties that's above the 85% threshold which includes Cumberland, is maintained by the EST canvas system. And so that was, when I looked at it, that was sort of surprising to me. The only one that's above the 86.8 that doesn't use EST system is Washington County, who completed their reassessment in 2017. It's already at 86.8, and I was the one who did that reassessment. So he's the project manager. So that being said, you have to think that maybe EST has the right idea as to how they do reassessments. I think that there was an oversight on there. Can we use other systems, CAMA systems? I think so, that we, and we can use it well and still maintain it, and I think keep the uniformity, and be able to maybe get that information over there. The only problem is if we were to purchase a system now, it would cost between $400,000 and $500,000 probably, and that's with people encoding the information from the EST system to the new CAMA system. And then you wouldn't be able to use the system until you did a reassessment. Now, you could use it for tax administration purposes, but you really wouldn't be able to use it until that happened as a valuation system, because then you would be actually doing the values differently, which is would cause us to get a court order to do a new reassessment, because it would be spot reassessing. So if we, but we could do it and use it, double duty on it, and encode all their information in there and the updates and the new construction in both systems, and wait for a reassessment. And that way we could get a lot of that information out of these newer systems into the hands of GIS and planning. And it does many other things than just value. But that's a decision that I think that many departments would probably have to meet with the commissioners to decide whether that's a good idea or not. But and I think now, the last time I quoted prices for a reassessment, the price was between $65 and $70 a parcel. So you're looking at 6.5 to 7.7 million. And that was a year or two ago. So it can be quite expensive. Yeah. So I think Washington County went into at 2017 with a little over, I think it was 6.2 million, and it's 120,000 parcel count.
Do you have anything else for us?
I think that's about it. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, very informative.
Yeah, I thought this was incredibly informative.
Well, thank you.
So I don't want to kind of turn back to that hot housing market, but there's something that Wes mentioned to me when we talked last week that I think you didn't mention, Wes, and I think that it was very compelling. And if you look at the breakdown by the classifications for the lots, we had talked about, invalid sales versus valid sales, but lots are 62.53. And so right now, one of the things Wes said to me last week that was like, aha, yes, that is absolutely right. I knew that, but it wasn't something I jumped to, is a lot of people, they can't find houses, they're buying lots, they're paying more for that lot than what it's really worth. They're going to pay on it for several years before they actually build their house. And that's something that Wes brought up to me that I thought was also very compelling, because that's obviously, that number is really moving our number closer to 85.
It seems just kind of crazy how all these are amalgamated into a singular determinant. That's what we're using to push the state to get their act together.
Yeah. I mean,
A little more scientific methodology.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good idea if they would adopt that you could separate the classes and go that way.
Other states do that.
Oh, yes. Okay,
That's great. Thank you very much. There's no other questions.
thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is other business. We have additional topics today. Staff, anything we want to say, cover. Okay. That in mind, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Stand adjourned.